We're here with Councilman Kevin Fisher, Ward 5, Democrat, of course. We do have one independent on council right now, but everybody else is Democrat. And coming up a little over a week now, we have the Charter Commission question. You've had reservations about it from the beginning. What's your take on what the outcome's going to be?
I think a lot of it will depend on voter turnout, where we have voters from. There's certainly there's still a lot of confusion out there on it. I was out knocking on doors all weekend. A large number of people were unaware that the vote was even happening or that it was going on.
Were you campaigning against it?
I was. Yes, I was out campaigning for a number of hours this past weekend. The Truth About Charter campaign. There's even, I haven't seen the numbers myself, but there's some polling out there showing that as of a month or so ago, 80% of the city was undecided. I mean, so, and I would have to attribute that to, a lot of people not necessarily understanding, number one, that it was up for a vote, and number two, not knowing, a great deal about the process. It'll be interesting, but obviously with that amount of undecideds, 6 weeks out, 8 weeks out before an election, when that was going on, it's very difficult to get a sense of how the numbers will come down, when we're finished. But however it turns out, I've also, encouraged everybody that, while I'm asking them to please consider voting no on 47, but to also make sure that they do select their candidates. Because if there's a commission to be formed, we want to make sure that we have representation from all corners of the city. We have just one candidate out of 53 in Ward 5, Rob Fisher, no relation, but Rob Fisher over from 12th Street. And Ward 5, we only have just 3 persons from the southwest end and only 1 in the southeast end. I'm trying to make it known to people that are voting no, to make sure that they also vote for people that they know or they trust or are also from their neighborhoods to represent them if the commission is formed.
But what do you think the likelihood that people from the southwest, southeast side of the city are going to end up on a charter commission if voters approve the formation of a commission?
Mathematically, it's certainly difficult. Rob is a good candidate. Rob is somebody that has been out knocking on doors. He's a neighborhood association president for the Banna neighborhood. He does a very good job in his community, staying involved. I don't know the other 3 members that are from the south side personally. I've seen them, at different events, but I don't know them personally to know, how what type of campaign they're running. But certainly when you look at the fact that the mayor's a candidate, the auditor's a candidate, treasurer's a candidate, law director, president of the school board's a candidate, Plain local school district has a candidate, several former council members, all with an enormous amount of name ID. As I've asked people, I said, well, when I will speak at a group and I go show of hands, who thinks the mayor is going to come in 16th place? Probably not a lot. So with that being the case, you can kind of see where the number of available spots begins to dwindle when you look at people that obviously have a lot of name ID and have been known for quite a while. So with that being the case, maybe there's 5 or 6 spots that maybe would be available to people without as much name recognition. So with that being the case, mathematically it's difficult, but Rob's certainly a very strong candidate. I think he has an excellent shot of anybody, at least from the group of people who are not elected officials or former elected officials. And with a name like Fisher, how could you lose?
Okay, moving on to the mayor's race. Where are you on that?
Oh, I've endorsed the Mayor Healy. I've been out also working to knock on doors on his behalf as well.
What kind of feedback are you getting when you knock on those
It's been
doors?
very positive, actually. It's been very positive feedback. The fact is that
Where have you been knocking on doors?
largely in my ward, that's where typically I would spend a great deal of my time, during an election. I was a precinct committeeman there for a number of years beforehand, so I did that even before I was on council. Was just walk throughout my precinct, which is actually what precinct committee people were supposed to do. So I would out and make sure we got people out to vote. But there's a lot of good things going on in the city now. We've had over the last few years quite a bit of road work that's happening in my ward. A lot of development, the Mills Industrial Park. We've had obviously projects such as the Hall of Fame. So there's a lot of positive feedback there. So, and then of course with a mayor going out with my beautiful face on it, on there, that's who wouldn't want that?
Targeted for Ward 5, right?
It's out in Ward 5, yes, sir.
Okay. And you optimistic that Healy's going to be reelected?
I am.
Okay.
I am. I believe it's, certainly when you're not in a presidential year, it's a little more difficult to predict voter turnout. It can vary, particularly on, this year with having the charter vote on, with 3 statewide issues being on, but then on the other side, there are no contested ward council seats. It's an interesting dynamic on how the voter turnout's going to go. And I think that always will give you pause and, so if you want me to slam my fist down on the invisible table here in front of us and go, I'm going to guarantee that this issue will pass or this will fail or this guy will get elected and that won't. My background in working in political campaigns, you like to hesitate from doing that when you're not sure how voter turnout is going to look, what kind of reaction we're going to have at the polls. I think in May, the number countywide was below 15. I think it was around 13%. And so I think that there's a certain amount of election fatigue, which I think largely has to do with the nonstop cycle of presidential elections. I mean, basically since we'll call it probably spring of 2003 when the Democratic primary with, Dean and Kerry and Lieberman and everybody going on, there was a nonstop primary, 2003, 2004. As soon as that ended, we were right in, you started hearing, Hillary Clinton running in 2008 and, and other candidates, John Edwards was in Iowa already campaigning. 2008, Barack Obama gets elected, you immediately have candidates out running. So we've had really, for the last 15 years, a nonstop presidential race.
And you think that hurts at the local level
Well,
turnout?
I think what can begin to happen is that there can start to see, I think, a little bit of election fatigue that will happen when everything you see in the news. I mean, how far out are we from November 2016? And it has been a nonstop barrage of Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton or whomever it might be, going back for quite some time. I think that because of the amount of news coverage you get, that can sometimes cloud out what's happening at the local level. Where if every time you turn on the news, they're talking about next year's election.
Right.
Forgetting the fact that we actually have some very critical elections going on this year, right here in Canton and of course in Stark County.
Okay, well, I think everybody agrees that there's some interesting
It's going to be
contest coming up on the decided November 3rd, and so it'll be an interesting night.
And on the theme that what we had tonight, I'll leave you with this, is that there's a lot of on 47 and on the mayor's race. There's a lot of people with a lot of passion on
Both sides. Right.
And I have friends that are people that I respect greatly, working on yes campaigns and no campaigns and Healy campaigns and what have you. It's important that November 4th, of course, that everybody puts everything aside,
Right.
and we get back to work.
Of course, if Burnaby's elected mayor, he won't be county commissioner. And Kevin Fisher has taken out petitions to run for that.
My petitions are filled. I've I haven't filed them yet, but I will. I've been focused, obviously. Have kind of set aside my personal race for a short time, working on the races here in Canton. Obviously still talking with people, going to different groups, talking about the commissioner's campaign for next year. But I've kind of set that aside for a few weeks to focus on what's going on here. But yeah, the Fish for Commish campaign will be off and running.
Okay, well, thank you, Kevin Fisher.